Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, Making a Dent in Data Silos, Navigating the Top 3 Data Problems Interrupting Student Success in Higher Ed. My name is Laura Beth Esel, and it's my pleasure to welcome you. Today, I'll be facilitating our conversation about data silos in higher education with Nick Janata, Director of Solutions Engineering at Coursedog, and we have Mickey Baines, partner at Kennedy and Company. Now, these experts bring decades of expertise to the table in technology and data solutions for higher ed. Today, we want to direct that insight to data silos and just what's at stake for institutions that don't find a way to organize and operationalize their data and zero in on student success. Now, before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping notes to share. Now, at the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets you can use. All the widgets are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. Please note the slides will advance automatically throughout the presentation. To enlarge the slides, click the Enlarge Slides button located in the top right-hand corner of your presentation window. Following the presentation, you'll be able to access the on-demand recording of the webinar using the same link from today's live event. So let's start with digital transformation. Digital tools ease the workload for academic administrators and empower them to execute exceptional educational experiences for students, especially in the realm of academic operations, where balancing schedule optimization, curriculum, and catalog management can have such a significant day-to-day impact on student experience. So the surface level benefits of digital tools are clear: reduced manual labor, fewer errors in course schedules and public catalogs, and streamlined processes for students and staff. You know, the list just goes on here. But something very interesting is happening in higher ed that we want to explore today. And that's how the current phase of digital transformation are playing out. Now, digital transformation has been a wild ride for higher ed. You know, we started out with manual processes based on paper and pencil and perhaps maybe spreadsheets. Then we made student information digital with student information systems, followed by a wave of point solutions that strive to solve certain challenges. So now, however, we've entered a fourth wave of digital transformation where SIS and closed point solutions no longer meet the needs of growing institutions. So this wave comes with new problems regarding data silos, user frustration and a poor student experience, that must be solved if institutions want to address today's challenges with data confusion, staff and instructor tech usage, and student experience. So today we're going to explore the 3 most common challenges associated with data silo challenges in higher ed, and we'll see some examples of how higher ed institutions are moving past these challenges so that the technology they use actually helps them pursue their institutional strategy instead of getting in the way of it. So I don't want to get too far before welcoming our speakers to weigh in. Nick and Mickey, thank you so much for being here today. Can you add some color on what we've talked about here in the evolution of technology for higher ed? Nick, we'll start with you here.
Yeah, thank you for setting the table and introducing everyone. So once again, Nick Janata, been doing this for a while, and I think what we're seeing in higher ed is like what we're seeing everywhere else in the world is really just kind of this evolution of technology. If you think about it, I mean, my parents like to tell stories about how they used to register for classes by walking into a gymnasium, going over to folding tables of various departments, and as we might all imagine, that produced a lot of paper, and that filled up filing cabinets, and before you know it, you really needed a better way to sort search through all that information rather than filling entire rooms with file cabinets where space, quite frankly, was short on a lot of campuses. This is something I think we even still see today to some extent. And that's where, those early stages of the student information system started coming in, whether it was a mainframe or even some of the more modern approaches that we see today, just really is a better way to get our hands wrapped around the data, start to structure it a little bit better. And you think at that point everything's good, but like we're seeing outside of higher ed, is really functional needs start to expand. We're focusing more to meet student demand. Some good examples of that is I want to see what my course is offering online. So you get things like an LMS. You want to be able to make payments outside of walking into a physical bursar's office. So you have payment gateways. I spend most of the time on my phone, so I need mobile solutions, et cetera. So we really started to see kind of that first wave of homegrown and point solutions. And also with that, what we're seeing is just this really big build versus buy scenario starting. Do we go out and find the perfect or best of breed solution out there, or do we kind of get our heads wrapped around? A lot of institutions have these great IT resources. Do they go build these solutions? Really, what was going on? And really, you saw a mixture of both, I think, at every institution. That quite frankly, just like the student information systems and the paper and pencil processes, we're seeing that today, and we're still maintaining a lot of these. We're still looking to replace some of these systems, and you're faced with challenges such as resourcing the existing systems that are there. We're really, I think, over to the right there is where we kind of are today, where there's this need for systems with flexibility, data portability, or integrations. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. And just general maintainability as these CTOs are really or these IT organizations within the institution are really having to keep their hands wrapped around everything going on at the institution. They really want a lot more control. So, as I say at that point, Mickey, do you want to chime in? That's that.
Sure. I agree very much with what you're saying there, Nick. It's interesting to see as I spend a lot of time with colleges. I was about to say on campus, but that's not so much the case over the past couple of years. But working with clients and looking at where they fall in this transformation, it varies. I think the vendors, the folks who are creating this technology, have found us a path to this fourth wave, but not every institution is there yet. I see a lot of institutions still at that second wave as their core. And then there's certain areas within an institution that have moved to that third wave. There are certain areas of an institution that are still at the first wave, too, mind you. And it will vary institution by institution. And I think one of the ways that we look about that, at least in our work as we help institutions implement technology, is really begin to look at what is their technology readiness. Where do they place? Sometimes it's a little bit of a leap to go from wave 2 to jump to wave 4. So how do we scale them and prepare them to be ready for it? But in terms of this wave, we're here, and now we have to help these institutions scale up to be ready to deploy and use the technology that the fourth wave provides.
Yeah, great points there, and thank you both for sharing that. And that really brings us to today's discussion, the top 3 problems of data silos that institutions need to focus on today, which are data confusion and isolation because of closed systems and walled gardens, stress and resistance from staff and instructors, and inability to use data to inform or improve student success and student experience. So let's get started here. There are some aspects of a closed system that are positive, like a sense of security and control over data, but overall, closed systems can lead to a lot of data confusion and inaccurate records because the systems don't talk to one another. So when every college or department within your institution collects different data in different systems, you can start to see the problem that's coming. So to solve this problem, it's so important to make a plan for what data you want to collect and how you'll use it, and for how your systems will integrate with each other to truly make the most of that data instead of just creating more silos, right? So on the screen, you'll see a few examples of how to consider your internal needs and how that might translate to the technology you decide to use. So Nick and Mickey, we'd love to have you weigh in here. Nick?
Yeah, thank you. And that's exactly right. When you look at these solutions, once again, whether you're building them, buying them, they're coming from somewhere between that initial pen and paper process all the way to the more modern solutions out there. You really, at the end of the day, what we want to say is can these solutions solve our problems, right? Do we want to ensure that they're growing with you and that they're meeting the institutional needs? Because as we all know, the second that you put a new process in place that maybe complements or comes with a new piece of software, it may already be dated as you're looking at some couple months to couple year long implementations. So really, it's key and important that these solutions can grow with you. And when we say growth, we don't just necessarily mean functional items, because oftentimes what we're seeing is like a functional item will push down to the data layer, and we need to then store new information to meet that. So good examples like the learning outcome initiative that we're seeing being pushed down from some states, and really is just kind of a way to track how institutions are lining up with the marketplace and what these learners are taking away. And a lot of the systems that are out there, whether it's pen and paper or even some of the point solutions, aren't necessarily equipped to do so. So that then the information gets maintained in these disparate data silos as a way to supplement the solutions that are out there. And this requires you to go gather data and report centrally. We see a lot of institutions now leaning on reporting tools like Argos, BI, Tableau, et cetera, which really then starts to beg the question is, how do you get access to that data? And I mentioned earlier we're going to talk about integrations a little bit, but really I like to kind of zoom back and say, what does your data portability solution look like? I think that starts with integration. Data shared between the system. Do you have everything syncing back to maybe your LMS or student information system? If so, do I know that it's up to date? Is this done in real time? Is this done on a nightly, monthly basis? Is it accurate? Do we have any kind of QA? Is it a full set of data, as I mentioned earlier? Is this just kind of a partial piece that's being synced? And so even if you have these reporting solutions based on top of all these silos, there are a lot of little nuances that you really have to keep track of. So it's, it brings me to my next point as well too, is even if it's not being synced centrally and I need to pull it into, reporting, are we able to get the data? Can I export the data? Is it stored in a walled garden? Do you have APIs, exports, et cetera? So these are all things that we're starting to see. A lot of institutions, I'd say almost every institution I speak with is working around these. They ask us these questions all the time, and really show me exactly what are you all touching. Show me your data. Show me your APIs. Show me your export capabilities. What are your built-in reporting capabilities, and then how do you complement a lot of these processes I have? And it's all really being driven by the fact that there really isn't one central source of data, and that has to do with just kind of this evolving technology that we've seen. So yeah, Mickey, I just wanted to kick it over to you and see if you had anything to weigh in on that as well too.
Yeah, and I'll circle back to as we consider the waves. Data silos exist. They're there. I have conversations all the time. We want to get rid of these silos, and we look at that second wave, that SIS kind of force wave. That was the first real enterprise type tool that was consistent across every campus that allowed us to collect lots of different types of data that we hadn't been able to collect and store, but we couldn't use them. Very limited functionality, not a lot of access and security privileges. You couldn't get to the level of granularity that we decided we'd need, and that's how the future, or the third wave, the point solutions came into place that gave us features and functionality, but limited the types of data that we can have and use. And so that's kind of where we are with this fourth phase, so that now we are allowing ourselves to collect data that we didn't necessarily know we needed, data that might be collected by other teams and departments across a campus, and turn it into actionable data that we need to use for our own purposes, and having access at security levels that allows the right people to have the right access to information and not be too restrictive and rigid in that. And that's how you can begin to address multiple challenges across multiple units. And that's where I like to see this. And when we think about planning, we think about solving for these desired outcomes, understanding the problems. What are the true data points that we really need? When are they collected? How are they collected? Who has them? And how do we get that access? That's, that planning process, essential for us as we prepare to move from whether that's wave 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. Those are all essential components to making that vision come into a reality.
Yeah, Mickey, I think that's a great point you bring up is who has access to what. And given right now, with all the various solutions that we see IT teams having to manage, I mean, I hear some institutions it's dozens, some it's hundreds. And then on the other side of that coin, you often hear that they're strapped for time and resources. And so really just to get access to a simple database or report oftentimes involves IT. And it just adds, and it's one more thing on their to-do list every day. So, going back to your planning piece, I think it's really key to say as you're looking to potentially replace whatever solution you have out there, whether that's a spreadsheet, database, custom system, existing vendor, et cetera, you really should be asking, how do we get access to this data in a way that is simple and intuitive? And we go back once again, is that an API with a key? Is that a simple CSV export? But once again, we're seeing this trend to kind of move away to say, how do I unburden the IT team so that they can keep the lights on?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great points there. And data doesn't operate in a vacuum. It exists so that representatives of the institution can do their jobs well. But when you bring in a solution that is too high tech for your current workforce or too many systems at once, the burden falls on your instructor, staff, and administrative personnel. So depending on how prepared they are to go digital, that might translate to lower usage and a smaller ROI on your technological choices. So how you hire and train institutional staff plays a role in this, but just as important is choosing tech that's designed for usability and aligned with the tech savvy of your users. You want technology that has a short learning curve so non-technical staff can quickly get up to speed and use the tool to its fullest capabilities and really enjoy doing so, right? So in this way, you support the employees who have institutional knowledge but not technological knowledge. So Nick and Mickey, let's talk here to this point. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, once again, I think what we're really looking for here, the primary goal of software is to create efficiencies. So this can be time, transparency in data, process, et cetera. And there is a little bit of a positioning process anytime you push out any new process, whether that, once again, a company's software or maybe it's even just a new paper process, is at the end of the day, you want to solve and save people time. And this gets into, everybody's doing a lot of things. You want to make sure that they're not stressed out, et cetera. We touched on this earlier. I need to go run this report. Do I need, am I tech savvy? Am I expected to be tech savvy? Or is my primary job to teach and be a faculty member? So that's where I think it's really important to not only say, am I able to access this data, but am I able to log in and use the system in a way that is simple and intuitive? Because that rollout process is just so important. I know one of the things with Coursedog is we've really focused on that. You get into certain things like just simple, is it a modern intuitive interface? Is it mobile friendly? These are kind of just checkboxes I think that we all take for granted, maybe outside of the education and technology realm. I don't know that anybody would use Uber if you had to log into your laptop every single time that you wanted to get a ride home. It just wouldn't work. And so these are things that everybody is really, is really just expecting anymore. So, once again, we're trying to kind of meet that minimum bar with usability, but it also gets in, as Mickey mentioned earlier, it's just who has the correct access to everything as well too. And that goes both ways. Is you have power users that want to, they want to have access to everything. They want to be able to go change and refine, and as we talked about earlier, grow with institutional changes over time. Processes change, approval processes, forms, workflows, et cetera. You want to be able to change those. But also those end users, those faculty members, they don't necessarily want to log in and see 100 different options. They want to just get in there. So for curriculum examples, I want to get in there and I need to just go review this approval because I'm on a curriculum committee. I don't necessarily need to see everything else going on at the institution. Sometimes I might also want to, But regardless, we want to be able to lock that down and really help with that intuitive experience, because we really find that is a key part of pushing out any new process, is just the adoption. And to get that adoption is to really say, this is going to save you time.
Mm-hmm. Nick, that's my favorite word, adoption. We talk a lot about ROI with institutions and their technology. And I can't tell you the number of times we go look at a piece of technology on a campus and see it's being used at 5 to 15% of what it's capable of. And at that point that the ROI that's been promised by a vendor to that institution is not being met. I describe it this way with institutions. We're in higher ed. Everybody kind of gets this. When you're bringing in a brand new freshman, a first-year student, there's a reason we don't put them in 300-level courses. And so if you aren't careful when you're selecting technology and you're looking at the most robust and technically able piece of technology and your users aren't there and aren't ready, we will overwhelm them. And it's not to say we can't go with that robust technology, but we have to know how to scale and build the users up so that they're ready to use it, so that that user experience that you're talking about, Nick, is there and that they're able to easily adjust and move into that type of technology. You talked a little bit about experience and ROI, but the expectation of the students. And if you want ROI, as you also are talking about technology that students engage with, if I underscale for my team because they aren't necessarily fully ready for this transformation, I can also bring in a tool that provides a less than capable experience or less than adequate experience for our students for what they expect. And that's where that planning comes into place, knowing that balance between where the staff are ready and what they can adopt and fully use, what the students expect, and finding that. And if there is a gap there, how do we then build up our teams so they're using it? When we're talking about any technology that faculty use, generally, we're looking at something that's not as heavy of a lift or far reach for them because they can become overwhelmed and not want to use the tool. And, if we want our students to succeed today, their expectation is that they have a lot of these pieces of technology. And so finding that gap, understanding how big the gap is, and then building the bridge to close that gap to help folks cross over is really important.
Yeah, great points there. And that brings us to the ultimate problem of a data silo, which is really the definition of a data silo itself. When data is isolated, you can't use it to inform or improve student success and student experience. So in other words, it doesn't matter how many or how advanced the tools you bring into your ecosystem, if they aren't up to date or used in service of student success or a seamless student experience. It's only by breaking down the data silo, and training up your users that staff, admin, and instructors can actually use their tools for the benefit of the students. So tell us about that, Nick and Mickey. What are your thoughts here? Nick?
Yeah, and I think once again, this kind of circles back to the fact that technology is supposed to enhance your life. That's really the end goal. It's supposed to save you time. It's supposed to provide tools so that you can do your job more efficiently. You can rely on it. And then also provide data so that we can actually inform student experiences and make better decisions. That said, that's all great. We want to have all this data. We want to look at this macro level and say, where are things going? Where should we be offering more resources, less resources? What courses are really popular and not? But there, once again, is we have the tactical things that we need to do. Every term, we need to build a schedule. Curricular processes are ongoing, 24/7. Courses are changing, programs are changing. Yes, they're informed by that macro level demand, but you still have that very tactical piece that you need to go manage this. And that takes a lot of internal time back and forth, whether that is walking up and down hallways, I maybe pre-pandemic, but at least now, going back and forth on chats, on emails, et cetera, just really saying, where are these things? And that's where, software can really help is provide a lot of transparency with what's going on with these processes, save you time doing these processes, because at the end of the day, what we're all here to do is serve the learner. We want to be able to spend additional time with the learner. We want to help them walk through their process. We want to spend time, as a faculty member. We're not necessarily retaining faculty members for their knowledge of internal software. They're really there to teach and ensure that the learners are getting what they're there to do. So what Coursedog, is really trying to do there is centralize a lot of that data. Once again, we really have pushed very hard on integrations. We want them to be real time. We want to have all the information we need. We want to be able to extend these schemas where maybe some of those previous waves were lacking. The learning outcomes item that I mentioned earlier is we see various states of that across various student information systems. I can't even point out one particular culprit with the student information system. So Coursedog is really able to allow you to extend that schema so that you have the entire full picture. And I can look at a course and I can say, here's all the information, here's the description, here's how it's going to look in the catalog, here's how it's going to be scheduled over here, here's the demand for this particular section. Is it popular? Is it unpopular? Is it blocking or part of this really important key degree pathway? And we can really inform a lot of those decisions. So once again, we can be more student-centric and spend time advising these students. Yeah. And I want to kick it over, I want to kick it over to Mickey at this point and see what he has to add.
So thanks, Nick. I would say to get us from what you're describing, I think to get to that point, the technology that you have allows us to get there. And I think I guess my point would be, how do we scale the team to get there? I've talked about that, I think, a couple of times already, but there are multiple models that we use as we're looking at how to implement a technology so that the adoption continues to grow and we can really see the ROI from the capabilities and features of a larger piece of technology, especially when we think about that fourth wave. Whether that's finding your champions, finding a pilot group of folks that go, but it starts with the planning to understand what is the data that we're going to need and how is that data going to be used to improve student success. How do the users, our team, our faculty and staff, how are they going to use it? What piece of data do they need? Having that in place and not thinking, hey, we've got this technology that does 5,000 things, that you have to go live with everybody using 5,000 things. It's understanding what's right for you and what are you ready for. So maybe it's 1,000 things, and version 1.0 is implementing those 1,000 things. So instead of adopting a tool and you're only using 5% of it, maybe you're using 85% of it. Because when you adopt at that higher rate, everyone begins to use it. You more clearly understand how it's working for you because it's consistently being used, and you start to build more buy-in. So instead of having a few champions, now you've got many more champions, 2, 3, 4 times that number of champions ready to go. And that starts to drive what we see as I just call it a flywheel, right? And so it starts to spin, adoption goes greater, people want to use more, ideas flow, more data begins to be understood and collected and used. And that, once you get to that level, then you truly are at this, dare I say, frictionless experience so that you can continue to use the tool and have widespread adoption. And you can really begin to see the results of all of the effort.
Excellent points. Thank you both.
Nikki, I was going to say, I think just you really drove that home as far as the planning and key alignment from the top down. Is that something that we really see as a key important part of the process very early on in the requirements gathering stage.
Yeah, excellent. And, a few years ago, digital transformation was just one of many initiatives in higher ed, but today it's a priority. Your institution's digital infrastructure for education delivery plays a pivotal role in how students experience your institution and the support they receive, for their student career. And when deployed properly, can help institutions make progress in important areas like student acquisition, retention, and completion. So I want to thank our speakers for joining us today and sharing their behind-the-scenes insights. Wherever you are with your institution's operations transformation, there should be an example or two from our talk today to help you think through your next steps here. And I think we can all agree that there's never been a better opportunity to apply digital technology to the very manual, sometimes very confusing processes that go into scheduling, operations, curriculum, and catalog updates and enrollment and completion data. And we are just so glad we had the chance to, talk through some of the friction points that can be removed, by doing so. So, we're getting close to the end of our time here today. Before we go, we've taken in some questions from our audience. Just a reminder, you can use that Q&A widget to pass along a question for our speakers here. And we want to try to answer some of these with the remaining time that we have. But if we don't get to your question today, just know that we'll reply later via email. So I want to jump right into these. And first question here is, why do you think there's more urgency to act and eliminate data silos today? What are the consequences of not taking action around this and sticking with manual processes? Who would like to take that one or start us off?
I can start, Nick. I think we're still riding a little bit of the wave of the pandemic, because that forced so many institutions to shift quickly and more fully to this virtual experience. And so I think right now we're still seeing a bit of that wave. People will begin to fully understand what others might have been preaching about for some time, to say, we need to transform and be more accessible to our students, not just on a physical campus. And so I think that those opportunities are there. There was some additional funding that the government provided that gave schools funds that they hadn't had in the past. And so they take some advantage of that. And when we think about consequences of not taking action, there are many schools that had already taken action, and then the pandemic came and many, many more took action. If you aren't, you're further and further behind. The further behind you are, the more effort, the more time, the more resources it will take you to catch up. And it's even more difficult to catch up to the front. You're just catching up to the tail end at that point. And so, that to me, that's the consequence. If you're just catching up to the tail end, you're still behind. And what does that mean for you? What does that mean for your ability to help students succeed? What does that mean for your ability to enroll new students? And it puts you at greater risk of continuing to be further and further behind.
Yeah, and thank you. I mean, you quite frankly hit on the 2 points that I'm seeing as well too. Is COVID really pushed everyone in a way that they maybe necessarily weren't ready for, and it wasn't so much of we need to, or it wasn't so much as a nice to have. Let's talk about all these things that we want to do. We want to clean up processes. It was that I have to. I can't physically go into my office, and I can't physically go pick up that catalog that I've been relying on for 20 years, or maybe that whiteboard that I've been using. So I'm really starting to go look for these solutions that I can centralize these processes, create a lot of transparency across institutions. So that really, I think has been big. Whether we wanted to or not, we all just had to hold hands and leap in that direction.
Excellent. Thank you both for jumping on that question there. Okay, I want to go to our next question we've got in here, and that's, what would you say to higher end leaders who have an unspoken belief that data silos are important, but not critical compared to other priorities? Good question.
Yeah, and I think that is a great question. I look at some of I can provide my thoughts here, but I look at some of the names in the chat as well too. I'd really be curious to hear, any thoughts from the audience as well too. But one common theme that we're seeing is, really harks back to the question itself, is we have a lot going on our campus, and we only have X amount of resources, right? And I think it gets into a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing. Is I have a lot of solutions. I have the student information system. I have hundreds of internal customers at the institution, and I just need to keep the lights on. But at the same token, everything is changing, especially the last 2 years. Everything is changing, everything's evolving. So I really need to kind of step back and say, how do I sharpen my axe? How do I improve my tool set? Maybe that is with solutions that are more intuitive to use. Maybe that's solutions that share data in a more efficient way, whether that's through integrations, data exports, APIs, et cetera. Maybe it's just something as simple as this particular solution is much easier to manage. I can outsource it. I can combine into one vendor. We're seeing a lot of that where really it's a way to say, how do I lower my burden so that I can do my job as an IT resource at this institution and still meet the needs of the faculty and the students. Because once again, at the end of the day, that's what we're all here to do, is help the students and meet those needs. So it's really kind of that balancing act of how do I do my day-to-day job versus how do I really step back and say, do I improve these processes so that I can do my day-to-day job?
I don't know that I have a whole lot more to add to what you just said there, Nick. I mean, what I'd say is, if we don't want to address them, to what extent is data access at the root of many of the technological problems? You know, as we go from wave 2 to wave 3 and we start looking at point solutions, which so many campuses are at this point of point solutions, there's X amount of time and resources that a team, an institution has to support 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 different types of tools. And all that continues to do is create more and more silos. And you know, if you don't address the silos by looking at what can we do with that fourth wave that reduces the amount of products that we might need on campus, that opens the gate to give people access to functionality and data. Because sometimes there are data silos, but there can be functionality silos. And that's really what we're looking at there. So, what do you say? You know, how long do you want to struggle? Because until you address it, you will continue to struggle, and it's going to become greater and greater. Data is at the core of what we need to do and grow in this industry right now. Institutions need more of it when we think student success. That doesn't occur without more data. And if you have silos or thicker walls of silos, the more difficult it's going to be to address student success more wholly.
Great points for both of you there. Thank you. Okay, another question I want to put in here, and that's, can you share a few pearls of wisdom about change management and successfully adopting new solutions?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. We've talked about this a little bit already. But number one for me and what I've seen is really that top level support. And that top level support isn't necessarily just your provost, vice provost. Sometimes we see it if we're pushing out a process to faculty. Curriculum's a great example. Catalog's a great example. We want to have support for maybe some of those louder voices, those internal champions, those early adopters, the department heads, the influential figures that you can pull in from your institution that are really going to help push these changes out. Some other things, and I think these seem to be a little bit table stakes at this point, but some other things that we also see as well is really having strong project management leadership. Not to say that you need a dedicated, quote unquote, project manager, but somebody that can really help align resources, work with the vendors, stay on task, stay on target. Once again, we know you all have a lot going on. This isn't your only job. In fact, it's oftentimes extracurricular, extra credit outside from your daily tactical duties every day, but really having that resource or being able to carve enough time out of the day to be able to spend and work with that line and the subject matter experts, go through and ensure that the configuration and the testing components, the solution is working as designed, and you're not necessarily cutting corners. But once again, that really comes back from that top level alignment. Is if we're saying from the top, this is a really important project, we're going to free up these resources for X amount of time, and really dig in with the vendors to say, okay, we're excited about this solution, it meets our needs. How do we go? How do we proceed? What do we need to, align? What resources do we need to have available? How long? What does this project look like? And take that deeper dive to ensure that you are set up for success.
I would add one thing to that we try to do in a large-scale project like this is let's identify our three highest level goals that we're looking to achieve, and having that as kind of your vision. It might be to improve your student experience. It might be to to open up access of data so that our teams can better service students and provide a great opportunity for student success. But establish those. I like to have 3. I don't want 5, but how do we have 3? Because when you go through change management, you start looking at how you implement a tool and what other processes you might be changing behind the scenes. There are a lot of decisions that need to be made, a lot of opportunities for compromises that will arise. And having that vision, those top-level goals, help you drive those facilitations, those discussions around each of those decisions as they arise to make the most informed decision that you can collectively. It's not to say that you don't compromise, but when you're trying to make those decisions, and sometimes they're in the weeds decisions, but looking back at those goals, will this decision improve the student experience? If that's one of our goals, yes or no? That doesn't give you the answer to the decision itself, but it helps you think through more clearly. If we choose not to make a decision that would help improve the student experience in this particular instance, we know that and we're intentionally making it because of some reason. But it helps make those decisions more intentional. I think that's always something that's important when you have these conversations, because some of these groups, these change management, sometimes we're working with a 20-person committee. It is very difficult at times to find consensus. Sometimes it's difficult to find consensus in a group of 3, but having those visionary goals that we're trying to achieve through this effort, having them there helps drive the conversation around to make an informed decision.
Great points there. Thank you so much. Okay. Another question I want to get in here, and that's from a strategy formation point of view, how can interdepartmental communication policies be created and implemented when there are data silos within an institution? I'd like to take this one on from our audience for us.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And we've touched on this a few times as well, too, is, not if there's data silos, there generally are data silos. I keep going back to the curriculum example because it's just such a good one. Is yes, you can have all of your courses in one particular place. Maybe that place is the student information system. But even if you have all your courses in the student information system, are they maintained there? Do your faculty members have access? If they do have access, do they know how to get in there? Are the descriptions maintained in the SIS, or maybe those maintained in the catalog? Where the learning outcomes maintained, maybe that's an entirely separate system. Then the list of courses, such that they make up programs and majors. Sometimes we see that in the degree audit system, sometimes it's in the catalog, sometimes it's in maybe D, all the above. So fairly concrete example there around curriculum and catalog, but something that we see a lot of institutions. So one way that Coursedog specifically has helped there, but I think this extrapolates to really any solution, is the first thing that we really work with the institution to do is walk through, we call it a data workbooking session, but really what it is data discovery, and say, well, where is all of this information? Is it in the student information system? Is it 80% there? Is it up to date? Where are those disparate sources? Let's pull in information from spreadsheets. Maybe it's other vendor solutions that have kind of half of that information, and really try to put that all in one place. And so that can solve the simple piece of, now we have all of our course information in one place. I have the name, I have the number, I have when it's offered, I have the description. And then with the access piece and that intuitive user interface, you can come in, you can search for that information, and faculty members aren't necessarily doing that thing where they're walking down the hall, they're picking up an old bulletin, and they're informing their course change process off dated information. So that can really help create a lot of transparency off of really simple items such as, what courses does my institution offer? But then we can go one step further. And once again, to use curriculum as an example, is, okay, I'm changing these courses. Who else has proposed changes to these courses? I'm in the biology department, and then maybe there's some overlap with chemistry, and I'm in the chemistry department. I want to be informed of these. How am I informed? Do we have approval processes set up? Can I log in and can I look at those? Can I look at all the pending courses in one particular place, or do I need to call the department head over in biology and ask for them to send me a spreadsheet? So Coursedog very specifically, or any curriculum solution at that point, can really help centralize a lot of that, so that we're not only, once again, creating transparency around what courses are offered, but what courses are in flux, so that I'm not necessarily proposing something that's already been proposed. Maybe it was shot down, maybe it's in flight, and really help save that time for everybody involved, including the curriculum committee, et cetera.
And I'll pick up from there, Nick, and just say one way that we begin to address things like this, what is your data governance policy on campus? If there's a solution or solutions that have data that others need access to, and there's a question about that, sometimes it's not the technology prohibiting the access to data, it's the functional owner of the technology that doesn't want anyone else to have information. And sometimes there are rules and regulations that are guiding that, and sometimes there's ego guiding that. And so when we think about intercommunication there, or interdepartmental communication, that's where governance goes into play. I'll circle back to my last comment about having those high-level vision and goals. What is it we're trying to achieve here? And if that is, let's just say it's increasing student success, that is the driver for the data governance group. They have to ensure that data is being protected properly. But in addition to that, we need to ensure that people have the right access of what they need. And that's when data governance comes into play, so that someone that's trying to be too loosey-goosey, that's a technical term, or too protective, that the governance group can come in there and help support that and then drive the right level of collaboration for the institution.
Yeah, excellent points there. Thank you for taking that question on from our audience. I want to throw another one. You guys are doing a great job, just to encourage you. So keep it up. All right, let's throw in another one at you. What should an institution look for in a provider or a solution?
Yeah, I was going to say, we've touched on some of these, but really for me, just my experience kind of, not just with Coursedog, but with other vendors, looking at both sides is really one, and maybe this is the technical side of me, but I tend to look and say, is the data available? Am I able to move this data back and forth? Is the integration there? And then the functional side really saying, can I meet those functional needs, not only today, but is this going to grow with me? Because as we know, these functional needs are changing constantly, and maybe that's an internal mandate, maybe that's just something coming from faculty members really saying, hey, can we do it this way? And sometimes the external forces as well too. You're a public institution, you have state or you have federal mandates coming down, so it's really not only does it meet those functional needs now, but does it meet those functional needs 10 years from now or 5 years from now? So those are really things that I look for. Another thing too on the soft side, not necessarily looking at the software itself, but what support is available. I think we've hit on the theme today that a lot of these IT resources at institutions are strapped. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of solutions that they're trying to maintain, and just really what support is offered. Are there self-help tools? Are there knowledge base? Do they have the ability to call somebody if they really need it? So these are really things that I would dig into, both from kind of an integration and a functional support perspective as well.
I'll put a slightly different twist to the question, because I think, Nick, you answered that question really well, and I don't have a whole lot to add to that. But what I will talk about is the process through which you're making that selection. We've helped institutions with that process. We've been on the other side trying to propose a solution through the process. Once you know those requirements that you have, once you know what resources you're looking for, be sure that you take the time in the process to fully understand each potential solutions offering for that, to really have a firm understanding. If you're looking at a comprehensive solution, you've gone through an RFP process, you've narrowed solutions down, and you're going to look at demos, and you're looking at something, let's just say it's a part of the fourth wave of the technology here for this digital transformation. A 30, 45-minute, maybe 60-minute demo doesn't cut it to give you all of that information. Be sure that you understand how the solution works, you understand how the vendor puts that solution together for you, supports you, all aspects of it, and that you take that time and don't quickly rush in to make some decisions because it looks flashy, because they said a few right things. Dive a little deeper, take time to interview your potential partners here to make sure that what they're presenting, what you've seen matches what they say they're presenting, and that you understand all of it, even on the back end for implementation, support, ability to manage, all those things, but you really have a firm understanding of that through the entire process before you make that choice. I've seen a lot of institutions come to us, hey, we need help. This is not the right tool. And you look at the process and it was rushed. It was written, an RFP was written by someone who didn't understand the solution. They narrowed down to a few demos. They did 3 demos that are 45 minutes or an hour long, and then made a choice without really taking it that extra step further to understand and confirm they really got what they thought they were seeing in a demo.
Great points there. Thank you both. Okay, I want to slip another one in here today, and that's, can you share any examples of institutions approaching their data the right way, and what kind of success stories are you seeing out in the world? So let's talk about some success and good examples here.
You want me to start, Nick? I can start with this one.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mickey, do you want to kick that off?
Sure. I see several places. I'll start on the West Coast. San Mateo Community College District, I think, does a really good job thinking and planning with their technology. And again, this is a 2-year institution district, so the 3 institutions that actually make up this district and how they look to approach this across their 3 campuses. They're 3 distinct institutions and usually share the same piece of technology, the core, whether that's their SIS, whether that's a CRM or LMS, how they share that and gathering those requirements, thinking about it holistically. They do have that strategic plan in place. They've made choices to go in and get new or replace existing technology based on the strategic plan and what they're trying to achieve. And so that's an institution that took a very intentional approach to this, and they've been succeeding really well through this. And it's a district I've followed for quite some time and stay in touch with them at least once a year. And I just the way they've implemented their technology and followed through with their campuses and is to me a model for how to do it.
Great. Yeah, I was going to say, and I wanted to highlight one of our early partners as well too, in Tempe, Arizona, or Flagstaff, my apologies, Flagstaff, Arizona with NAU. They are able to adopt our Coursedog scheduling solution, and they were able to really, through our platform, one of the first things that we do, I think I mentioned earlier, is we really identify all of the information. So on the scheduling side, that's really centered around section data. But as you dive deeper, you're saying, where are all the rooms? Do we have all the room features? Are they stored in a spreadsheet? Does the facilities department have them? Are they in another vendor solution? Do we have all the departments and the approval processes, et cetera? And once you really centralize that information, you're able to improve the reporting and kind of move away from that really tactical day-to-day arduous process of building the schedule. So they were able to really sit on top of that information and do things like reducing conflicts in their schedule. They're reporting that initially they were seeing improvements by 60%. So that's great because if you're reducing conflicts, that frees up space. It helps improve learner velocity through their degree programs. And once again, at the end of the day, the goal here is student success. So if they're able to move faster through their degree, you're going to see higher completion rates. They're also able to do things like drop their overfilled sections by 14%. When I say overfilled, what I'm really saying is we're not bumping right up against the capacity of that section. And so they're able to effectively plan and manage. But also on the other side of that coin, if you're looking at overfilled sections, you're saying these are really popular courses. Maybe we want to offer more of these. Maybe now, since we improved the scheduling conflicts, we can go then add additional sections. We can move this into a bigger room, et cetera. And then lastly, they saved about 250 hours each scheduling term, just auditing errors and enforcing policies. So this goes back to that point that I brought up earlier. We're really saying that if you're spending a lot of time, even as an administrator, working on these tactical day-to-day processes, scheduling, curriculum, et cetera, you're not funding that with students. So that 250 hours, is really key. Where they're able to really refocus a lot of that time and resource over directly to the students and learners.
Excellent. Thank you both for taking on all those questions. That's all the time we have today. A huge thanks to Nick of Coursedog and Mickey of Kennedy and Company for their time and expertise, and of course to our audience for joining us today. As a reminder, this webinar will be available on demand and a link will be sent to you soon. Have a great day, everyone.